Hi, thanks for joining. My name is Debbie, and I'll be taking you through today's Skype for Business Maximizing End User Adoption and ROI session. Let's go ahead and get started. Today, I'd like to level set by really talking about how communication is going to directly impact a return on investment for whatever solution that you're looking to deploy, right? The right communication is going to help things like improve productivity, reduce costs, whereas the wrong communication can delay projects, result in lost time and money and things along those lines. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about communication and then the communication solutions such as Skype for Business and how that can really help drive your ROI within your organization. We'll then change gears and talk about how do you get users to adopt a technology like Skype for Business and why a proactive approach is really critical in getting users to change their behavior. And we'll spend the bulk of our time sharing our step-by-step guidance, resources, recommendations, everything you need to help execute a successful rollout of Skype for Business within your organization. So let's go ahead and jump right in. When you think about it, communication is really the heartbeat. It's everything that your business does. It's everything, it keeps your organization going, right? It's whether you're chatting with a colleague across the hall or conversing with customers around the globe. It's really everything that you do. It's who you do it with, as I mentioned, customers, vendors, partners, colleagues, etc. And it's how you do it. Some may be face-to-face. You might pick up the phone and have an audio call. It might be an online meeting. A lot of it happens over email. So many different ways that we communicate with all of our various colleagues and customers. And as I mentioned earlier, communication is really going to directly impact your ROI, right? When you have a successful communication, when you build that trust and that relationship with your colleagues and customers, you're going to drive increased business productivity, reduce costs by maybe not having to travel as much if you can get those calls done over the phone or over an online meeting. Your end users will be happier because they're able to get their work done in a more efficient manner. So many different ways that you can tie a return on investment to having the right and effective communication within your organization. Now, the tools you choose to use can either help or hinder you as far as production goes. So let's take a look at a few examples here. Let's say that you just needed a quick sign off from a colleague or maybe your manager in order to move forward on a project. If you were to simply send them an email and said, "Hey, John, I really need your sign off. Can you just reply back to me and give it a yay or nay so I can move forward?" Well, what if John has 700 other unread messages in his inbox, which we all know can easily happen. So good luck, right? Good luck getting a quick response back from John. How about another example? This one I resonate with so much. Very often I'm creating a new training program or a new adoption workshop, and I'd love to have some of my colleagues review that workshop for me. Well, if I were to just email out this document, for example, to 5 different colleagues, guess what? I'm getting 5 emails back. Now that's multiple reviews that I need to do, probably some conflicting feedback that I'm getting, some confusing feedback where I need to ask for clarification. So once again, this is an example of where, using email in this case may actually impede productivity because going back and forth over email, we can be spending weeks simply trying to get to the bottom line for a specific project. However, if you have the right communication tools, they can really help streamline everything, getting the right people together at the right time, getting your questions answered much more efficiently and effectively, keeping the conversation going outside of an email or outside of a specific meeting. And it's really going to help improve that collaboration aspect with your colleagues and customers and really help build that trust and that foundational relationship that you really need to help those good communication tactics move forward. And what we'd like to present now is Skype for Business, right? I mean, that's why you're here. Skype for Business can truly help optimize your communication. Whether you're needing to contact someone with a quick IM, the example I gave earlier of just needing that quick yes or no decision, whether you need to hold some formal or collaborative online meetings, right? Getting everyone together, regardless of where they're located, all together at the same time. We have new voice components, so PSTN conferencing, the dial-in conferencing bridge for the times where it's not an option for someone to connect online to a meeting. They can still dial in. Even using Skype for Business as your actual phone. My computer rings. I check my voicemail on my computer. How efficient is that? I get to take my phone with me wherever I go. Never have to miss another phone call. And then Skype meeting broadcast, when you need to do the one-to-many. So big launch events, big trade shows, things like that, really helps you scale out with your communication. So many different ways that you can leverage Skype for Business to help optimize communication and in turn get a great return on your investment. So some of these features may or may not be available depending on the type of licensing and what features you've purchased, but I encourage you all to, at this point, just take a minute and think about which one or ones of these tools you plan to roll out to your end users. So the next step is, hey, great, we want to roll all of these out, or we just want to roll IM, or we want to roll meetings. Well, you really have to get users to adopt this technology, right? Just snapping your fingers is not going to get them to automatically start switching up the way they work to start using Skype for Business. So how do you get users to adopt? And let's take a minute to first define what we mean by adoption. You see it up here on the slide. It's really that daily habitual use. So if I send one IM a month, that's not daily habitual use, that's using it every once in a while. But if I were to use IM every single day, if I were to schedule all of my meetings as Skype for Business online meetings, if I'm using it as my phone, that's your daily habitual use. You're using it across all available workloads on a daily and consistent basis. Now that does require, though, that users change the way they work today. Right? And that's a big shift for a lot of people. Sometimes change is not that easy. In fact, over 70% over change initiatives fail within an organization. And by really pushing users to try to switch to a new technology, they end up managing resistance instead of effectively managing change. So what we really want to do for you today is show you how to effectively manage change and not manage resistance. And let me tell you what I mean by that. If you look at the left side of the screen, you'll see the common approach that I see so many customers doing. On the left, a little chart, the big bubble there is technical deployment. They spend all of their time getting the logistics right, getting the client deployed, opening up their ports, getting everything they need from a technical standpoint. And that little tiny box that you see as an afterthought, more or less, is an email with a link to training. And they think that's sufficient to get users to adopt a technology. Well, look at that sample trajectory. It's pretty low. Now, the approach that we take is an equal amount of attention on end user readiness focused activities and the technical deployment. They need to go hand in hand and they need to overlap. So you don't want to wait until your technical deployment is completed before you start end user readiness focused activities. And in parallel with that, you want to make sure that you're paying enough attention to all of the different facets of an end user readiness program so that users really create that stickiness and they really want to use this technology. And that's really what this workshop today is all about. I'm going to take you through step by step how to do that merging of the two bubbles there, of making sure you have everything you need, both from a technical and a technical deployment standpoint. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So I'd like to get started with a few questions just to get the ball rolling in your mind about how to approach a technology like this. The first thing I want you to think about is, what is your vision for Skype for Business? Why did you purchase Skype for Business? What workloads? We talked about those available workloads earlier. What workloads are you planning on deploying? So think high level. What is your vision? Why did you buy this? Are you looking to reduce costs, increase adoption? The example I gave here is save X amount of dollars, within your organization, streamline your collaboration tools. So many different ways that you can visualize how Skype for Business can be used. And then what I'd love for you to do is really think about what that means for the end user, because an end user will or may likely see change as a way that's impacting their productivity in a negative way. And you want to really say, no, this is great for you. We're doing this to help you be more productive. We're doing this to save you time and save you money at the same cadence. So really take that overall vision and think about what that means for the end user. And I call that translating your vision into value. So you want to think about the what's in it for me component from an end user perspective. So that's an activity I'd like you to take out of this workshop, is think about your high level vision at an organizational level and then translate that into what that means at an end user value level. And then I want you to think about, well, who can help you realize that vision and the value for that matter? This is not a one-man show. You want to enlist a team to help you. It all starts with an executive sponsor who's driving this overall effort from a CEO or CIO type of level that can really hold everyone accountable for making sure this gets deployed correctly. And then enlisting a project lead, that may be you as you're watching this workshop today. That's really the change manager, that person who's going to be driving and pulling together all of these end user readiness efforts. It may be also an IT pro if they're doing both the technical and end user readiness activities. So again, think about who that person may be. And then you want to enlist a whole other set of resources, such as marketing. Who's going to be the ones that create and send out emails? Who's going to be creating training plans? The IT role, we'll talk about that in a second, of who's going to make sure the technical deployment is all set up and completed. Help desk, right? If a user has a question about a technology they're using, the first person they're going to call is the help desk. So you really want to make sure that your help desk and support team is part of this overall planning effort so that they're ready to take those calls. And then finally, departmental managers. They are such a great resource to become champions and influencers for you to help showcase to their employees how Skype for Business can be used. So I just mentioned IT, and a lot of customers tell me, well, that it kind of seems like a disconnect. This is all about end user readiness, end user training and support. Where does IT really fit in? Well, as I mentioned earlier, when you saw those two bubbles, there needs to really be an equal amount of effort from an IT deployment technical setup as well as an end user readiness setup perspective. So I'm going to touch for a few minutes here on what does it mean to ensure your environment is set up for Skype for Business. And I put these into three buckets. One is the actual configuration, so DNS, ports, things like that. Your vanity domains, if that's something you want to set up for your online portal, making sure users are enabled. So you do have to, just because you have everything set up, make sure users have an assigned license for Skype for Business. So make sure you're going into your portal as an admin and assigning the right amount of users out to everyone who needs access to use Skype for Business. And then the third step is making sure they have the client. There is a specific client for Skype for Business that allows you to communicate over IM and join meetings and check your voicemail. So many great things all condensed into this one little client. And there's a desktop client, there's mobile clients, there's a web access client. So think about what's the best client options for your organization. If there's a sales organization that travels a lot and they use their mobile phones for everything, hey, you really want to make sure they have the mobile client for Skype for Business. There is a checklist that I will be making available to you at the end of today's program that gives you a checklist with links to all of these activities to access the client and license assignment and things like that to make sure that you have everything you need from a technical standpoint. But again, it's a critical component as you're going through your rollout to make sure you're set up for success. All right, so talking about success, the next thing you really want to think about is how are you going to measure success? So often I have customers that say, well, we want to increase productivity or we want to drive adoption. What does that really mean? How can you know at the end of the line when you cross that finish line that you've achieved all of the goals you set out to do? So for example, if your customer is saying, hey, we're switching our PSTN conferencing from a third-party provider to using Skype for Business conferencing. Well, maybe you want to look at how much money you're spending or how many minutes of usage you have on those products today, and then make a goal. 90 days after you launch this with Skype for Business, you want to realize X amount of savings. You want to realize X amount of minutes because you don't want to see the usage minutes go down. You want to see them either stay the same or go up. So it's always great to establish a baseline. So really think about depending on which workload you're rolling out and what your overall vision is, how can you measure success? And again, we do have a goals and success measurements document to help you formulate some thoughts around creating success metrics for your organization. All right, so this is where I usually have a little stopping checkpoint. These are some activities that I really encourage you to do before you move forward. Obviously for today, I want you to watch the whole workshop. This deck is also available in my downloads package that I'll be sharing with you at the end of today's session. But this would be a really good point when you go back to start executing your rollout to say, okay, before I just jump right in, here are the things I want to get done. And it's the technical deployment, it's getting your project team, defining your value and vision, and your goals and metrics. And as I mentioned, in our rollout kit that I'll be sharing with you, you have some easy to use guidance to help you along those lines. All right, so let's say, great, you have your team all ready to go, your technical deployments underway or completed, you know what your goals are. Now, how do you really start executing? This is really where we go through this 4-step approach. What we feel is that IM is ubiquitous, pretty much, right? Everyone knows how to text these days. Chances are you might already have an IM tool that's in-house or in use. So IM is the easiest way to get your foot in the door and get users adopting this new technology instead of launching everything at them at once. So I encourage you to start with, as I call here, step 1, getting users up and running with IM. Then you can start moving into meetings and voice and some of those other workloads, because those may really depend on a user's role within an organization, kind of scenario based, if you will, of how they might be using this technology. So you want to target a few user groups. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Then you're ready to launch this to everyone. Have a big launch party, have a big launch event. We have a sample launch event deck you can even use to kick this off. Again, available as the templates at the end of the session today. And then step 4 is so critical. After you launch Skype for Business, it's so important to keep the momentum going. Just like a roller coaster, you don't want to see you go all the way up and then come crashing down. You want to see it go up and then stay up and then keep climbing up. So we'll share some ways about how do you continue that excitement ongoing in the months and years to come. The great news is this framework I'm sharing with you is repeatable. So if you say, you know what, we just want to launch IM, or maybe we'll be deploying voice in 6 months or 8 months, great, go through this step 1, or piloting, launch, maintaining for whatever workloads are in scope today, and then maybe 3-6 months down the road when you're going to be launching new workloads or when new features come out, just follow the same process. It's a great framework that is repeatable at any point in time. All right, so as I mentioned, step 1 is really, the goal is to just generate buzz. And the way to do that is with instant messaging. Think about how great it would be, going back to that example I shared at the start of today's session, where I have that email I need to send to my manager to get that quick yes or no decision on my project. What if, as soon as I go to send him the email, I can see his presence. I can see an indicator that shows that he's red or he's green, and green means go, right? Green means, hey, he might be available to chat. And instead of sending that email, I open up an IM and I say, hey, John, do you have a second? I'd like to get your sign off on a quick project. Boom, within a minute or 2 minutes, you're getting that question answered. Versus sending that email and waiting for a reply. So things like that to show how folks can get started with instant messaging, how it's integrated with Outlook, how they can really start driving that usage from day 1 is a great way to get out the door. And what you'll find in the materials I'll share at the end of today's session is an email template and a job aid on how to get started with IM today. It gives a very clear call to action for your end users. Add 3 points of contact to your contacts list, start sending them an instant message, whether you're looking to go grab coffee, whether you need that quick sign off, whatever the case may be, just get them using it. It starts creating that stickiness, which ultimately will drive to that daily habitual use of adoption. So once you have everyone up and running on instant messaging, you then want to start thinking about meetings and voice. And you might be wondering, well, why are they merged together, right? Meetings and voice, they're kind of 2 separate things. Yes and no. If you're looking at dial-in conferencing or PSTN conferencing with Skype for Business, that's really a meeting. You get those conferencing bridges and conferencing numbers when you schedule an online meeting. So from that perspective, they are really integrated with one another. And if that's a workload you're looking to deploy, I do encourage you to think about them holistically as you look at this second step of kind of piloting with some users to drive momentums with meetings and voice. Here is where it's really critical to think about who your users are. And what I mean by that, if I'm someone where my team sits with my entire team rather sits within a 3 foot, 5 foot radius of me all in the same office, you know what, I'm just going to be screaming at them from over my cue ball or walking to their desk to have a quick chat with them. Whereas if they're all scattered around the US or even around the world, I'm truly going to rely on online meetings and dial-in conferencing and those specific workloads to make an impact on my business productivity. So I encourage you to think about either departments or users or personas, whatever resonates within your organization. Who are those users who have a specific use case for online meetings and dial-in conferencing, for example? And you see, I have a couple of examples here, right? Remote workers. Remote workers could be everything from someone who simply works out of a home office or someone like a road warrior who's constantly traveling, sitting in airports, things like that. They always have a need to communicate with everyone by not being face to face. Great use case for online meetings and dial-in conferencing. So really start looking at these different personas. Think about what personas you might have in your own organization and what types of meetings they benefit from, what type of voice capabilities, depending on what you're launching within your organization, what type of voice capabilities they'll benefit from. If you're looking at using Skype for Business as your phone, right? So making and receiving calls, now's where you want to start thinking about devices. Again, someone who travels, who's sitting in an airport, is not going to find no value in having a desk phone that's sitting on their desk because they're not there to use it. Whereas someone who's homed in a home office, they would find value in having maybe a soft phone that they can make and receive calls because it reminds them of the olden days when folks actually, had a desk phone with a dial tone. So again, really think about who those users are. And the great thing, I won't go through this, is a lot of text on this slide. I'll just touch on this for a minute. But you can see we've tried to help you get a head start. This is also in a document that's in those downloads that I'll share with you at the end of the session. But we started identifying some of those personas or roles or departments for you, what kind of characteristics they may have within an organization, what that value messaging is for them. So remember early on I said, what is your vision? Translate that into your value, the what's in it for me. Why are those users going to care? This is a great way to say, what is the value of meetings and voice for these particular persona groups? Because when you send that email to them saying, hey, we understand you travel a lot. We have this new technology. Here's how it's going to help you. Here's what's in it for you. Here's why we want you to give this new solution a chance. And here's your call to action. Here's what we want you to do this week to get started. You want to have all of that pulled together. So what we have as part of this resource package for you is sample email templates where you can easily plug in that value statement based on the audience that you're sending the email to. And then I also mentioned devices. Again, really critical. You don't want to hand someone a desk phone who's never sitting at a desk, right? You really want to think about what types of devices do these user groups really need to make their job successful. So this is a great way to start off with a couple of different user groups. Maybe you pick 2 or 3 different user groups that you can pilot meetings and voice and devices and really get their feedback on, is this really working for you? Because again, we need them to start adopting it. So you want to have them test it, give you some feedback, and then modify your approach as needed before we go into the next step, which is launching this broadly. So once you've vetted out your process and training and devices and things like that with some of your core groups of users, now it's a great chance to announce this broadly with a specific launch event. And I'll throw out a tip. If you're using Skype meeting broadcast, that is meant for this type of event. It's really meant to be a one-to-many. Let's announce this broadly. Let's get it out there. Some other ways you can do Skype meeting broadcast, if that's in your scope for your deployment, all hands meetings. Here at Microsoft, we use it for our own all hands meetings, product launches, trade shows. I have a lot of customers who say, well, you know what, we can't afford to send all of our employees to a trade show or host our own trade show just from the, incurring all of that cost. Have virtual trade shows. You can set up individual broadcast sessions or Skype meeting sessions on different product features or launches, whatever it is that you're trying to get out there. So such a great way to use this technology. But I do encourage you to use Skype meeting broadcast for your launch event. And again, we have a launch event deck that you can customize and use to share this out with your end users. So that would be your next step. Announce it out to everyone. All right, that was a lot of information. We've now come to our next checkpoint. So this is again where I'd encourage you as you're going through your rollout to kind of take a breather here and say, okay, what do we want to do? And this is really designed to happen over 4 weeks. You can accelerate it or you can span it out depending on what your timeline is within your organization. But you can see here in week 1, you can get that IM email out with a job aid and get folks up and running on instant messaging. Weeks 2 and 3, you can identify those persona groups and have them test out some of that functionality from a meetings and voice perspective. And then by week 4, you're ready to schedule and host your launch event. So within 1 month, you can really get Skype for Business out the door across all of your available workloads and to your entire organization. And this workshop is really meant to show and give you all of the guidance on how to do that. As you can see, I won't read through them, but you can see there's lots of documents we have in our rollout kit that you'll have available to you to help you execute and plan all of these tasks. So once that's done, all right, you have everyone's using IM, your meetings has been piloted with a certain group of users, you've now launched this broadly to your organization, you're now ready to move into step 4. This is where you want to maintain that momentum. And this is an actual customer example that you see on the slide of their different use cases. So you can see IM and meetings and so on and so forth. And you can see every time this customer did a momentum activity, their usage ticked up that much more. And that's what starts creating that stickiness and that viral adoption over time. So I really encourage you to think about how can you create that momentum? What kind of activities can you drive on a maybe start monthly and then move to a quarterly cadence? What kind of things that you can implement within your own organization? And now the next question I always get asked is, well, what have other customers done? We don't want you to reinvent the wheel. So I'm happy to share some of the things that other customers have done to drive that long-term momentum and success. The first thing is utilize a variety of activities. You do not want to just send a series of emails and assume that's your awareness campaign. Awareness and training happen over a variety of different methods, and the more you can implement, the better chance you have of driving that awareness and creating that stickiness. So everything from emails, you can order posters off of the Fast Track Center for Office 365 and individual workloads. Creating change champions. Champions are people who are the people that raise their hand, right? Remember when you were in school, people always raise their hand to volunteer for a project? These are your change champions for Skype for Business. They're the ones, the early adopters, the ones that are excited to use the technology and maybe show some early results. They are very likely to help talk about this positively with some of their end users. So enlist them, find out who those users are, make them part of that persona group or pilot group that you test this functionality out with. Give them some special devices to help entice them and really use them to then drive this momentum forward with their peers. End user training, that's so critical to make sure training is available. Everyone learns a different way. The great news is Microsoft has so many free training resources available to you, from online articles and videos and downloadable quick reference cards. So I encourage you to leverage as many of those as you can out to your users. Demo days. This is a great one. I love demo days. We had a customer that had device launches and device days in their cafeteria. So what users can do is they set out 5 or 6 devices, and users can come and put their headset on and say, no, this one's uncomfortable, or put a different headset on and say, yeah, I like this one, or yeah, I want the wireless one, because I'm always walking around the office. It allowed them to feel like they were part of the decision. So maybe you've selected 5 devices for end users to pick from, but then end users in turn got to pick which one would work for them. And that goes a long way in helping end users feel like they're part of the process, aside from them feeling like they're being forced into a decision that they had no control over. So demo days are a great thing you can do. The other thing is create a SharePoint site, right? SharePoint, OneDrive, SharePoint is part of your Office package. Set up a SharePoint site for Skype for Business. Post your training there. Post online feedback or a wiki, if you will, where folks can go and ask questions and then have your champions answer those questions. A great way, again, to encourage that use. And Make sure that everything there is posted so that end users can be self-supportive, right? They don't always have to call the help desk or always have to ask their manager. You'll be surprised, or maybe not, at how often people are simply afraid to raise their hand and say, I don't know how to use this, or I'm not really sure, how this can help me in my job. Well, if you have self-service resources on your SharePoint site, it gives them a place to go where they don't have to feel like they're raising their hand saying, I don't understand this. So set up a SharePoint site, upload all of our training links and videos and whatnot, your overall messaging, a recording of your launch event. Once you do that, have that there for new hires. It's a great way to point users to that information. And then if you are going to make devices available on an online site where they can order, set that up and make it very simple. So if you already have a market site or a place where users go that they typically order peripherals and other things, make sure that you have a section on there for Skype for Business headsets and other devices as well. And then really this is a great opportunity to start leveraging other products within the Office 365 suite. So here you see Yammer. Yammer is such a great way to create that user champion, user community within your organization. You set up a Yammer site. It allows the champions to feed off of one another and say, hey, I got this question from an end user. Can someone else help me? Or even creating a user community where end users can go in and ask questions of other end users or say, does anyone know how to do this? Or I'm trying to use Skype for Business for this scenario. Has anyone tried that? Can you offer any incentives? And either the champion or another end user can reply. So it's a great way to create that framework, create the foundation, while also showcasing how another product within the Office 365 suite can be used. So again, Yammer is just a great way to organize all of that into a kind of an ongoing, I'll call it kind of an ongoing community, social networking kind of environment for your organization. All right, so we've reached our next checkpoint here, and this is really, okay, what do you do now, right? We've talked about you've planned, you have your success goals and metrics, your project team helped you, you've now launched IM, you've piloted with some specific user groups, you've launched this out to your end users, and now you're ready to start executing on some of those momentum activities. So maybe you want to do a monthly newsletter, or set up that SharePoint site, and you can actually do your newsletter. I have had customers that do them, create their newsletter through SharePoint. So it's a way where they highlight wins and set up that Yammer community. These are just some things that you can do. Most importantly, lead by example. If you truly want your end users to adopt this technology, show them how it can be used. Hold your team meetings. Encourage your departmental managers. Remember I said they were a key part of your project team. Encourage them to hold team meetings and one-on-ones and all hands meetings, things like that, using Skype for Business, because as end users see how it can be used, they're more likely to go and try and use it themselves. And we have lots of guidance there, awareness, training, planning, support planning as well, voice planning, to help you execute these different activities in the long run. All right, so we've come to the end of our workshop, and here is where I tell you how to get those materials. So if you simply go to aka.ms/SFB rollout kit, that is going to be the download for all of those materials I referenced at the start of today's session. You'll have access to those. Periodically, that content does get updated. So I encourage you every once in a while, maybe just go to that AKA site and re-download the kit, see if there's new materials there. We'd love for you to give us feedback on this workshop that you reviewed today, as well as the materials. It's the only way we know what's working for you and how we can improve. So please take a minute and go to aka.ms/SFB workshop feedback. It's just a quick survey. It should take no more than a minute of your time to tell us what you thought of today's session, as well as give us some feedback on materials and what we can improve upon moving forward. And if you still have questions, if you need some assistance, we have an SFB adoption alias, just sfbadoption@microsoft.com, kept it very simple. So I encourage you to send an email if you still have any questions about rolling out Skype for Business at your organization. So that's it. I appreciate you joining and sticking with me through today's session. Again, please go ahead, download the kit, give us some feedback, let us know if you have any questions, and most importantly, congratulations and enjoy using Skype for Business.